The moment I stepped through my childhood home's front door, I knew something was wrong. The familiar scent of Mom's arroz con pollo filled the air, but the warmth I expected to feel never came. Instead, there was a hollow emptiness that made my stomach twist. My name is Tatum, and after spending a year building my career abroad, I thought coming home would feel like slipping into a favorite sweater. I was wrong. Mama, I called out, wheeling my suitcase across the worn hardwood floors. The sound echoed through the house, followed by the clatter of pots from the kitchen. Tatum, me here. Mom emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her embrace was tight, but something felt off in the way she pulled back too quickly. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I caught an earlier flight, I said, scanning the living room. Everything looked the same, except, where's Abuela's portrait? Mom's smile faltered. We had to make some changes while you were gone. Carmen's wedding planning took over the house. I walked to the empty wall space, my fingers tracing the faded rectangle where the portrait had hung for decades. And Abuela's ring? I'd like to wear it now that I'm home. The silence that followed was deafening. Mama! I turned to face her, my heart racing. Where's the ring? She wouldn't meet my eyes. We needed it for Carmen's wedding. The venue she wanted was expensive, and you sold it? The words came out as a whisper, but they might as well have been a scream. That ring was meant for me. Abuela promised. You've been gone too long, Tatum. Mom cut me off, her voice hardening. Carmen needed it more. She's building a life here, while you've been off chasing dreams in Europe. The front door opened, and Carmen breezed in, her perfectly manicured hands clutching wedding magazines. Tatum, oh my God, you're early. She moved to hug me, but I stepped back. You sold Abuela's ring? Carmen's smile dimmed. Oh, that. She glanced at Mom, then back to me. It was just sitting in a box, and the wedding venue? Just sitting in a box? My voice cracked. That ring was the last thing Abuela gave me before she died. She made you promise, both of you, that it would be mine when I turned 30. Which was 3 months ago, Mom interjected, when you were too busy with your career to come home and celebrate with family. I was closing a major deal. You knew that. The memory of Abuela slipping the ring off her finger and pressing it into my palm flooded back. Mi pequeña guerrera, she'd said. This ring survived wars, crossed oceans. It's meant for someone strong, someone who fights for what matters. It's done, Tatum, Mom said firmly. The ring is gone, and Carmen's wedding is in 2 months. Either be happy for your sister or what? I challenged, but Mom just shook her head and returned to the kitchen. Carmen stepped closer, lowering her voice. Look, I know you're upset, but this wedding means everything to me and Lucas. The venue was perfect, and we needed the money. You understand, right? I stared at my sister, this person I'd grown up with, shared secrets with, protected from schoolyard bullies. Now she stood before me, perfectly coiffed and completely unrepentant about stealing my inheritance. Congratulations on your wedding, Carmen, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. I hope the venue was worth it. I grabbed my suitcase and headed upstairs to my old room, ignoring Carmen's calls behind me. Once inside, I locked the door and sank onto my bed, pulling out my phone to text Remy. They sold it. They actually sold Abuela's ring. Remy's response was immediate. What are you going to do? I looked at the photo on my nightstand, Abuela and me on my college graduation day, her ring glinting in the sunlight as she held my hand. The memory of her words echoed in my mind. Sometimes, mi amor, justice comes not from fighting, but from being clever enough to make others face their own choices. I'm going to make them regret it, I typed back to Remy. Every last penny they got from that ring. From downstairs, I could hear Carmen's excited chatter about table arrangements and flower choices. Mom's laughter floated up through the floorboards, and my jaw clenched. They thought they could dismiss me, dismiss Abuela's wishes, because I'd been gone too long. Well, I was home now, and they were about to learn that the little girl they remembered had grown into exactly the kind of woman Abuela had seen in me, someone who fights for what matters, no matter the cost. I spent the next morning at the local coffee shop, laptop open, diving deep into my family's financial records. Being a financial analyst had its perks, namely, knowing exactly where to look for information that most people wouldn't think to hide. More coffee? The barista asked, hovering near my table. Please, I nodded, not looking up from my screen. Something wasn't adding up. Carmen's wedding venue cost was astronomical, but the money from Abuela's ring wouldn't have covered even half of it. There had to be more to the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Dress fitting at 2. You're coming, right? I typed back a quick, of course, while opening another browser tab. That's when I saw it. A mortgage approval from 3 weeks ago. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up property records. Holy shit, I whispered. They hadn't just sold Abuela's ring for the venue. They'd used it as part of a down payment on a house, Carmen and Lucas's dream home. My phone buzzed again. Remy this time. Found anything? Meet me for lunch? Need your legal expertise. An hour later, Remy slid into the booth across from me at our favorite diner. Spill, she said, ordering a coffee without looking at the menu. I pushed my laptop toward her. They bought a house, used Abuela's ring money as part of the down payment. Remy's eyes widened as she scrolled through the documents. This is a gorgeous property, but wait. She squinted at the screen. There's something odd about this mortgage structure. Exactly, I said, leaning forward. They barely qualified. One missed payment, and the whole thing could collapse. Tatum, Remy warned. Whatever you're thinking. I know the real estate agent, I cut in. Remember Jake from high school? He handled the sale. Remy sat back, crossing her arms. And? And he owes me a favor. Remember that time I helped his sister with her visa application? Tatum. The waitress arrived with our food, interrupting whatever protest Remy was about to make. I waited until she left before continuing. I'm not doing anything illegal, I assured her, just making some inquiries as a potential buyer. Of what? Any properties Jake has listed, including ones that might come available soon? Remy took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. You're going to try to buy their house if they default, aren't you? I shrugged, picking at my fries. I'm just keeping my options open. You need to be careful, Remy said, lowering her voice. This isn't just about the ring anymore. You're right, I agreed, checking the time. It's about respect, family, keeping promises. I stood up, grabbing my purse. Speaking of which, I have a dress fitting to attend. The bridal shop was exactly as pretentious as I expected. Carmen stood on a pedestal surrounded by mirrors, while Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. You look beautiful, mi amor, Mom gushed. I forced a smile watching Carmen twirl in her designer gown. The dress is perfect, I said, and it was. Simple, elegant, everything Carmen wasn't. I knew you'd love it, Carmen beamed. And wait until you see the house, Tatum. It's absolutely perfect. Lucas and I close next week. Can't wait, I replied, my phone buzzing in my pocket. A text from Jake. Free for coffee tomorrow? Need to catch up. Oh, Carmen clapped her hands. You should come to dinner tonight. Lucas's parents are coming over, and Dad's making his famous paella. Wouldn't miss it, I said, typing back to Jake. Tomorrow at 10, the usual place. That evening, I watched my family gather around the dinner table, laughing and planning Carmen's perfect day. Lucas's parents were lovely people, completely unaware of the undercurrents of tension. To Carmen and Lucas, Dad raised his glass. And their new beginning. Everyone clinked glasses. I took a sip of wine, studying Carmen's perfectly manicured hands, wondering if she ever thought about the ring that should have been on mine. Tatum's been so quiet, Carmen said suddenly. Tell us about Europe. Did you meet anyone special? I smiled, setting down my glass. Actually, I did meet someone interesting recently. I paused, watching their eager faces. A real estate agent. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. You're looking to buy? Just keeping my options open, I said, echoing my words to Remy. You never know when the perfect opportunity might come along. The conversation moved on, but I caught Mom watching me with narrowed eyes. She'd always said I had Abuela's smile, the one that didn't quite reach the eyes when we were planning something. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Jake. And then, well, as Abuela used to say, patience is the companion of wisdom. I had plenty of both. Jake hadn't changed much since high school, still had that easy smile and nervous habit of tapping his fingers on the table. We sat in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, away from the morning rush. So, he said, sliding a folder across the table, I pulled the records you asked about. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Tell me what I'm looking at. Your sister and Lucas barely qualified for the mortgage. Jake lowered his voice. They're stretching themselves thin. The down payment barely made the minimum requirement, even with the money from the ring sale. How much was the ring worth? The question had been burning in my mind. Jake hesitated. Market value? Around $15,000, but they sold it to a private collector who paid $25,000. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. $25,000. That's what they thought Abuela's legacy was worth. Here's the interesting part, Jake continued, pointing to a clause in the contract. The seller included a right of first refusal clause. If they default within the first year, the property goes back on the market with strict conditions. What kind of conditions? The kind that would make it difficult for most buyers to qualify. Jake gave me a meaningful look. Unless they happen to have liquid assets and an excellent credit score. My phone buzzed. Remy. How's the meeting going? Don't do anything stupid. Jake. I leaned forward. What exactly do you owe my sister and Lucas? Nothing. He shrugged. They're just clients. But you, he smiled. You helped my sister stay in the country. I haven't forgotten that. I nodded slowly. So, if another buyer came along, one with better qualifications? Jake raised an eyebrow. I'd have to present any legitimate offers to the seller. It's my legal obligation. I gathered the documents, sliding them into my bag. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate the information. Tatum, he called as I stood up. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Real estate can get messy. Don't worry, I smiled. I learned from the best. Our high school debate team captain, remember? An hour later, I sat in Remy's law office, spreading the documents across her desk. This is insane, she said, reading through the mortgage terms. They're one missed payment away from disaster. Exactly. I pulled out my laptop. And look at this, Carmen's wedding budget spreadsheet. She accidentally shared it with my old email. Remy whistled at the numbers. These are some expensive taste. How are they affording all this? They're not, I said grimly. They're counting on wedding gifts to cover the gaps. But with the house payment, property taxes, and the wedding debt, it's a house of cards, Remy finished. But Tatum, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I have the money, I cut in. That deal I closed in Europe, the bonus was substantial. This isn't about money, Remy pushed back from her desk. This is about family. Are you ready for what this will do to them? To you? My phone lit up with a text from Carmen. Cake tasting tomorrow. Don't be late like you were for the dress fitting. They weren't ready for what selling Abuela's ring would do to me, I replied, showing Remy the text. Besides, I'm not doing anything wrong, just being strategic. Remy sighed, pulling out a legal pad. Okay, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. First, you'll need a shell company to make the purchase. Keep your name off everything until the last possible moment. We spent the next hour planning, Remy's legal expertise helping me navigate the complexities of real estate law. By the time I left her office, the framework of my plan was solid. At the cake tasting the next day, I watched Carmen and Lucas sample flavors, their faces glowing with excitement. Try this one. Carmen pushed a plate toward me. It's champagne with raspberry filling. I took a bite, thinking about the documents in my bag. It's perfect, I said, just like everything else in your wedding. I know, Carmen beamed. And wait until you see what we're doing with the house. Lucas's parents are helping us furnish it as a wedding gift. That's so generous, I smiled, remembering the clause in their mortgage about furnishing loans. When do you move in? Right after the honeymoon, Carmen said dreamily. It's like a fairy tale, isn't it? Everything falling into place perfectly. I thought about Abuela's ring, probably sitting in some collector's vault, about the portrait that had disappeared from our wall, about promises broken and memories sold. Yes, I said, taking another bite of cake, just like a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as Abuela used to remind me, weren't always sweet. Sometimes they were warnings wrapped in sugar coating, teaching lessons about greed, betrayal, and consequences. And I was about to teach my family a lesson they'd never forget. The real estate office buzzed with activity as I signed the final paperwork for my shell company. Jake sat across from me, sliding document after document across his desk. Remember, he said quietly, timing is everything. One wrong move and this all falls apart. I know. I initialed another page. Has Carmen made her payment this month? Jake checked his computer. Barely, they had to pull from their wedding fund. He lowered his voice further. The caterer called me yesterday, asking if I knew why their last check bounced. My phone lit up with a text from Mom. Family dinner tonight. No excuses. Perfect timing, I muttered, signing the last document. How long until everything's in place? 2 weeks, Max. Jake gathered the papers. Just in time for the wedding. That evening, I walked into my parents' house to find Carmen in tears at the kitchen table. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. The florist, Carmen sobbed. They're demanding full payment up front now. Something about their policy changing. Mom shot me a suspicious look as she patted Carmen's back. It's okay, mi amor. We'll figure something out. I could help, I offered innocently. I have some savings. No, Dad interrupted, entering the kitchen. We don't need your money, Tatum. We'll handle this as a family. Like you handled Abuela's ring? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The kitchen fell silent. Carmen's sobs quieted to hiccups. That's enough, Mom snapped. We're not discussing this again. Fine. I sat down watching Dad serve the enchiladas. How's the house, Carmen? Everything ready for the move? Carmen brightened slightly. Almost. The painters finish next week and then… If we can afford it, Lucas cut in, joining us at the table. He looked tired, worry lines creasing his forehead. The rates on our credit cards just went up. I took a bite of enchilada, hiding my smile. Amazing what a few calls to credit card companies about suspicious activity could do. You two are just having pre-wedding jitters, Mom insisted. Everything will work out. My phone buzzed. Remy. Papers are filed. You're officially a ghost buyer. Speaking of work, I said, putting my phone away, I might be buying some property in the area. Any advice, Lucas? You're in real estate development, right? Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Actually, I'm between projects right now. The market's complicated. That's not what I heard, I pressed. Jake mentioned some interesting opportunities coming up. Carmen's fork clattered against her plate. You've been talking to Jake? Just catching up, I shrugged. We were friends in high school, remember? The tension around the table was delicious. Mom's eyes narrowed. Dad studied his plate, and Carmen exchanged worried glances with Lucas. More enchiladas? Dad offered weakly. Later that night, Remy called as I was driving home. The florist called, she said. They're willing to be flexible on the payment schedule. How flexible? They'll take half now, half after the wedding. But Tatum? Remy paused. I saw the guest list. Over 200 people? The numbers don't add up. They never did, I replied, pulling into my driveway. That's the point. The next morning, I met Jake at Carmen and Lucas's future house. The painters were taking a break, leaving us alone in the empty living room. The seller's interested in your offer, Jake said, his voice echoing off the bare walls. If anything happens with the current buyers, I walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn. And the timing? Their next payment is due 3 days before the wedding. Jake checked his phone. If they miss it, everything's ready to go. I turned, taking in the space where Carmen had planned to put her wedding photos, the corner where she'd picked out a Christmas tree spot. Having second thoughts? Jake asked. No. I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of Abuela's ring. They made their choice. Now they'll live with it. That afternoon, Carmen called me in a panic. The wedding planner quit, she cried. Something about professional integrity and bounced checks. Tatum, what am I going to do? Breathe, I said calmly. I'll help you find another one. Really? But you've been so distant lately. You're my sister, I replied, thinking of the documents sitting in my safe. Family helps family, right? As I hung up, another text from Remy appeared. Last chance to back out. I looked at the photo of Abuela on my desk, her ring glinting in the sunlight. Sometimes, she used to say, the most important lessons cost everything. No backing out, I texted back. The house of cards is about to fall. 1 week before the wedding, I stood in Carmen and Lucas's future kitchen, watching them argue in hushed tones by the granite countertop they couldn't afford. We can't keep pulling from the wedding fund, Lucas hissed. The mortgage payment is due in 4 days. My parents will help, Carmen insisted, but her voice wavered. They always do. They can't, I interrupted, making them both jump. Dad's credit cards are maxed out. I saw the statements on his desk yesterday. Carmen's face crumpled. Why are you here, Tatum? To gloat? I'm here to help with the wedding plans, like you asked. I set my laptop on the counter. Unless you don't want my help anymore? Lucas ran his hands through his hair. I need to make some calls. He walked out, phone already pressed to his ear. Carmen slumped against the counter. Everything's falling apart, she whispered. The caterer's threatening to cancel. The venue wants the final payment tomorrow. And now the house. You could postpone the wedding, I suggested, watching her carefully. No, Carmen straightened up. Everything has to be perfect. We've invited everyone, booked everything. I can't be the failure of the family. Like me? The words hung in the air between us. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. That's not what I meant. You're successful. You're gone too long? I quoted Mom's words back at her. Too focused on my career? Tatum, about the ring. My phone buzzed. Jake, payment deadline tomorrow. They haven't made any arrangements. I have to go. I cut Carmen off, gathering my things. Wedding emergency to handle. As I reached the door, Carmen called out, Wait, I never thanked you for helping with everything these past weeks. I turned back, seeing my little sister, really seeing her, for the first time since I'd returned. She looked small, scared. Nothing like the confident bride who dismissed my feelings about Abuela's ring. That's what family does, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. At home, I found Remy waiting on my doorstep. We need to talk, she said, following me inside. I just got off the phone with the venue. They're giving Carmen and Lucas until tomorrow noon to pay, or they're canceling. I know. I poured us both a glass of wine. The mortgage payment is due the same day. Tatum. Remy set her glass down untouched. I saw them today at the park near my office. They looked happy, in love, despite everything. Love doesn't pay bills, I said sharply, or replace family heirlooms. No, but a knock at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find Lucas standing there, looking desperate. I need your help, he said without preamble. I know we're not close, but Carmen loves you, and I love her. Come in. I stepped aside, watching him pace my living room. I messed up, he admitted. The development project I was working on fell through months ago. I've been pretending everything's fine, taking consulting jobs to make ends meet. But now reality's catching up, I finished. Please, he looked at me, eyes red. I'll pay you back every cent. I just need help with the mortgage payment. Just this once. Remy shot me a warning look. Tatum. I walked to my desk, pulled out the folder of documents I'd been collecting. How much do you know about your mortgage terms, Lucas? What? The right of first refusal clause, the accelerated default provisions? I spread the papers on my coffee table. Did you read any of it? His face paled. How did you get these? The same way I got these. I added the credit card statements, the bounced check notices, the catering contract with its missed payments. You've been watching us, he whispered, planning something. Like you planned to sell my grandmother's ring? I kept my voice steady. Like you planned this perfect life you can't afford? Lucas staggered back. Carmen was right. You've changed. No, I corrected him. I just stopped letting people take what's mine. He left without another word, the door closing softly behind him. That was cruel, Remy said into the silence. That was honest. I gathered the documents back into their folder. Something my family hasn't been in a long time. My phone lit up with a text from Carmen. Whatever you're planning, please don't. Not before the wedding. I'm begging you. I showed the message to Remy, who shook her head. It's not too late to stop this. But as I looked at the empty space on my finger where Abuela's ring should have been, I knew it had been too late the moment they sold it. The payment deadline is tomorrow, I said, finishing my wine. Let's see if love really conquers all. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather and imperfect timing. I stood in front of the church mirror, adjusting my bridesmaid's dress while my phone buzzed with notifications. Jake, payment missed, default proceedings initiated. Remy, venue payment cleared last minute, weddings on. Jake, offer accepted by seller, papers ready. You look beautiful, Mom said, appearing behind me in the mirror. Almost as beautiful as Carmen. Almost, I echoed, watching her face. Did you help them with the venue payment? Mom's smile tightened. We sold some things. More family heirlooms? Enough, Tatum. She gripped my shoulders. Today is your sister's day. Don't ruin it. The church filled quickly with guests in designer outfits, all here to witness Carmen's perfect day. I stood at my assigned spot, clutching my bouquet, watching Lucas fidget at the altar. The wedding march began, and Carmen appeared on Dad's arm. She was radiant in her white dress, smiling through her veil. For a moment, I almost wavered. Then I saw it, on her finger, a new ring, diamond encrusted, obviously expensive. My stomach churned. Dearly beloved, the priest began, but my phone vibrated silently in my hidden dress pocket. Jake again. Everything's done. You own the house. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and promises. Promises, I thought bitterly, like the one they made to Abuela about her ring. At the reception, Carmen danced with Lucas, their faces glowing with joy. I sat at my assigned table, watching the champagne flow, knowing each bottle represented money they didn't have. You okay? Remy asked, sliding into the seat beside me. Perfect. I pulled an envelope from my clutch. The timing couldn't be better. Tatum, please. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ's voice boomed. It's time for the Maid of Honor's speech. I stood, envelope in hand, and made my way to the microphone. The room fell silent. My sister Carmen, I began, has always known exactly what she wanted. The perfect wedding, the perfect house, the perfect life. I paused, meeting her eyes across the room, and she's always known how to get it. Carmen's smile faltered slightly. When we were kids, I continued, Carmen wanted my favorite doll. She cried until our parents made me give it to her. When we were teenagers, she wanted my prom date. She got him too. Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. But this year, she wanted something that wasn't hers to take. I pulled out my phone, showing the picture of Abuela's ring. This ring survived wars, crossed oceans, and was promised to me. But Carmen wanted a perfect wedding more than she wanted to keep that promise. Tatum, Mom warned from her table, but I kept going. So today, on this perfect day, I wanted to give my sister and her new husband a gift. I held up the envelope. Something to match their perfect taste. Lucas stood, his face pale. Tatum, don't. It's the deed to your dream house, I announced, watching their faces. Or rather, my dream house now. The payment you missed yesterday, the one you needed for your perfect wedding. It triggered the default clause, and I was there, ready to buy. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Carmen's perfect makeup began to run with tears. You can't, she whispered into the microphone I still held. That's our home. Was your home? I corrected, just like this was my ring. I set the envelope on their table. Consider it karma or consider it justice. Either way, you have 30 days to vacate. Congratulations on your perfect wedding. I turned to leave, but Carmen grabbed my arm. How could you? She sobbed. We're family. Family, I pulled away. Family keeps promises. Family respects memories. Family doesn't sell what isn't theirs to sell. Enough! Dad's voice boomed across the room. Both of you, outside, now. In the garden behind the venue, surrounded by the roses Carmen had insisted on, our family drama reached its breaking point. Fix this, Mom demanded. Give them back the house. Like you gave back my ring? I challenged. Carmen sank onto a bench, her white dress pooling around her. We needed the money, she whispered. We were desperate. And now you're homeless, I replied. Funny how karma works. Por favor, Dad pleaded. We can work this out. I looked at my family, Mom's angry tears, Dad's disappointment, Carmen's ruined makeup, Lucas's defeated stance, and felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. The house is mine, I said firmly, just like the ring was supposed to be mine. You all made your choices. Now live with them. I walked away, leaving them in the garden, the sound of Carmen's sobs following me into the night. In my purse, the house keys jingled with every step, a melody of revenge finally served. The morning after the wedding, I sat in my new kitchen, their kitchen, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the echo of what I'd done. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. Mom, how could you do this to your sister? Dad, we need to talk. Remy, call me when you're ready. Carmen, please, we can fix this. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Lucas standing there, still in his wedding suit, looking like he hadn't slept. Can I come in? His voice was hoarse. I stepped aside, watching him take in the boxes I'd already moved in. Efficient? He commented dryly. I learned from the best, I replied. How's Carmen? Destroyed. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. She's at your parents' house, crying about how she's lost everything. Her sister, her home, her perfect life. And the ring? Lucas met my eyes. That's why I'm here. I found something you should see. He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. The collector who bought your grandmother's ring, he's willing to sell it back. My heart skipped. What's the catch? Double the price, Lucas said. $50,000. I laughed bitterly. And you're telling me this because? Because I know where the ring really is. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Carmen never sold it. She pawned it. The world tilted sideways. What? She was going to get it back, Lucas continued. After the wedding, when things settled down. The collector's story was to make it seem final, so you wouldn't look for it. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a pawn ticket, dated 3 months ago. Why are you showing me this? Because I love Carmen, Lucas said simply. But what she did was wrong, and now we're both paying for it. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Carmen, mascara streaked down her face, still in her wedding dress. You weren't supposed to tell her, she screamed at Lucas, pushing past me into the house. That was our only leverage. Leverage? I grabbed her arm. You were going to blackmail me with my own grandmother's ring? I was desperate. Carmen wrenched away. The house, the wedding, everything was falling apart. I needed you to give it back. Give it back? I advanced on her. Like you gave back my ring? Oh, wait, you didn't sell it. You pawned it. Like some cheap piece of costume jewelry. Girls, Mom's voice cut through our argument. She stood in the doorway, Dad behind her. Enough. No, I said firmly. Not enough. Carmen, where's the pawn ticket? I'm not giving it to you. She clutched her purse tighter. Not unless you sign the house back over. Carmen, Lucas warned, but she ignored him. You want your precious ring, she continued. Then give us back our home. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The desperate gleam in her eyes, the way her perfect wedding dress was now wrinkled and stained, the new ring on her finger that probably cost as much as the down payment they couldn't afford. You haven't changed since we were kids, I said quietly, still thinking you can cry your way into getting whatever you want. And you're still the same bitter, jealous sister, Carmen spat, always thinking everyone owes you something. Stop it, both of you. Dad stepped between us. This isn't what your grandmother would have wanted. No. I turned to him. Abuela taught me to fight for what matters, to stand up for myself. Where were you when Carmen took what was mine? When Mom sold, no, sorry, pawned, my inheritance? We were trying to help your sister, Mom pleaded. By hurting me? I pulled out my phone, dialing Jake's number. Hello? Yes, I need you to start the eviction proceedings immediately. Tatum, no! Carmen lunged for my phone, but Lucas held her back. 30 days, I said into the phone, watching my sister collapse into Lucas's arms. Not a day more. You'll regret this, Mom said, her voice cold. Family is forever, Tatum. Family? I gestured around the empty house. Family died the day you chose her perfect wedding over Abuela's wishes. They left one by one. First Mom and Dad, then Lucas, practically carrying a hysterical Carmen. The pawn ticket was still in her purse, along with whatever leverage she thought she had over me. My phone buzzed one more time. Remy. Was it worth it? I looked around at my new house, bought with betrayal and paid for with pain. The walls seemed to echo with Carmen's sobs, with Mom's disappointment, with Dad's silence. No going back now, I texted Remy. But as I stood in my victory, I felt nothing but hollow. The pawn shop bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Behind the counter, an elderly man looked up from his newspaper. "Can I help you?" I placed the pawn ticket on the counter. Carmen had finally surrendered it last night, slipping it under my door with a note. "I hope it was worth it." The man examined the ticket, then disappeared into the back. My heart pounded as I waited, remembering Abuela's words the day she gave me the ring. "Power isn't in the gold, mi amor. It's in what we choose to do with it." He returned with a familiar velvet box. Inside, Abuela's ring caught the fluorescent light, its worn gold and tiny diamonds exactly as I remembered. "That'll be 3,000 plus interest," he said. I handed over my credit card, my hands shaking slightly. As I slipped the ring onto my finger, my phone buzzed. "Remy, did you get it?" "Me? Yes, meeting you in 20. I found Remy at the courthouse, clutching a manila envelope. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, handing me the papers. "No," I admitted, "but Abuela would be." We drove to my parents' house in silence. Carmen's car was in the driveway, along with a moving truck. They were packing up her things, preparing for the eviction. Mom opened the door, her face hardening when she saw me. "Come to gloat?" "No." I held up the envelope. "I came to fix things." In the living room, Carmen sat surrounded by wedding gifts they'd have to return. Lucas stood by the window, while Dad occupied his usual armchair. "What's this?" Carmen asked as I placed the envelope on the coffee table. "Open it." With trembling fingers, she pulled out the documents. Her eyes widened as she read. "A lease agreement?" "1 year," I explained. "Market rate rent. After that, if you make every payment on time, you'll have the option to buy back the house." "Why?" Lucas stepped forward. "After everything—" I held up my hand, Abuela's ring glinting. "Because this ring isn't about power or punishment. It's about family." Carmen stared at the ring. "How did you—" "The pawn ticket you gave me." I sat beside her. "Carmen, what we did to each other. It has to stop." "But the house is yours now," she whispered. "You won." "Nobody won." I took her hand. "Look at us. Look at what we've become." Mom moved closer, her eyes on the ring. "Your abuela would be so disappointed in all of us." "No," I corrected her. "She'd be waiting for us to make it right." Dad cleared his throat. "The lease payments? They're reasonable?" "More than reasonable," Lucas confirmed, reviewing the papers. "This is generous, Tatum." "With conditions," I added. "First, no more secrets, no more manipulation. And Carmen—" I turned to my sister. "You need help with the spending, real help." Carmen nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I've already called a financial advisor." "And the wedding gifts?" I asked. "Being returned," Lucas said firmly. "All of them. We're starting fresh." Mom touched the ring on my finger. "It looks right," she said softly. "It belongs there." "Yes," I agreed. "And this house belongs to all of us. The memories we'll make here, the family we'll rebuild. That's worth more than revenge." Carmen hugged me suddenly, her tears soaking my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything." "Me too," I whispered back. Dad stood, his eyes misty. "Your abuela used to say that family is like a garden. Sometimes you have to prune hard to grow stronger." "But you don't pull out the roots," I finished, remembering Abuela's words. Later that evening, as Carmen and Lucas signed the lease agreement, Mom brought out an old photo album. "Look," she said, opening to a page with Abuela's picture. "She's wearing the ring here, at your 5th birthday party, Tatum." In the photo, Abuela sat between Carmen and me, one arm around each of us, the ring catching the light just like it did now. "She knew, didn't she?" Carmen asked quietly, "that we'd need something to bring us back together someday?" She knew we'd find our way back, I replied, touching the ring. If we were brave enough to choose family over pride. As I drove home that night, I passed the house, their house now, at least for the next year. The moving truck was gone, and lights glowed warmly in the windows. My phone buzzed one last time. Carmen, thank you for giving us a second chance. We won't waste it. I smiled, Abuela's ring comfortable on my finger where it belonged. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in winning the fight, but in knowing when to end it. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma works in mysterious ways, not to punish, but to heal.